I'm Lauren with IndoorGardening.com, and today we're going to talk about how to take care of your lipstick plant. Aescanthus radicans, also known as the lipstick plant, is a very, very beautiful plant. It's usually found in hanging planters. It's a gorgeous hanging plant, also great in wall planters. They can grow in a variety of different households and grow in a variety of conditions. They also have the most gorgeous blooms for which they're named after, and they're very easy care. It can be a little bit intimidating because flowers indoors is not a very common thing, but I assure you it's pretty easy with these plants. And we're going to give you all the tips today. The first thing we always like to do with our care guides is to talk about the origin of this plant. The lipstick plant is actually from Malaysia. It grows in the forests, in the understories. It grows on the trees there. It's a beautiful epiphytic plant, and it does not need a lot of light because of that. With it being an epiphytic plant, that also means that it does not need a lot of care. It doesn't have a lot of care requirements, and the maintenance for it is very easy. It also means that it can be a very fun and interesting plant to grow. Let's talk about lighting. Because they are understory plants and they grow on trees, they really do not need that much light. Bright indirect light works best for these plants, but they work really well in just about any type of light that you can give them. As long as they're getting some light, they will adjust and adapt and still grow for you. To get the fastest amount of growth from them though, you want to give them bright indirect light, which essentially means that you just want to stick them in a window where they can get as much light as possible and just pull a sheer curtain or keep them a couple feet back from the bright window. And it also means that they'll grow slowly if they're in dark corners of your home. They do like their light. Alright, so let's talk about watering. Lipstick plants absolutely love their water. They do not like to dry out too much. Because they grow on the forest trees with moss all around them, they're constantly in a very moist and humid environment. They do not like to dry out very much. And because they're in hanging baskets, they tend to be allowed to dry out just a little bit too much, or they dry out more quickly than other plants. They use their water quite a bit as well because they have very thick, chunky leaves. So that's another thing to kind of keep in mind. Just don't forget to water them while you're taking care of them, especially if you have them in hanging baskets. Heat rises and hanging plants dry out a lot faster than any other plants. So just keep that in mind and then adjust your soil accordingly. Speaking of soil mix for these plants love a heavy African violet mix. So it's going to have a lot of peat moss. It's going to be very water retentive in there, and it's going to have a lot of moisture and hold on to a lot of moisture for a long time. If you cannot get a hold of an African violet mix, then you can do something that's like bark, sphagnum moss with a little bit of charcoal, just something to kind of help filter and have moisture retention as well. This is a great standard epiphytic mix. Just keep in mind that if you do something like this and you have them in a hanging basket, they will dry out a little bit more. So you will have to adjust whatever mix depending on how you're actually growing your plant. Another thing that African violet mix is known for is having a balanced pH, not having a lot of fertilizers and chemicals in the mix as well. Because these plants are epiphytic, they're a little bit more sensitive and they prefer water retentive without all of the extras. They still prefer to be fertilized occasionally, but a very light fertilizer, just a small bit. You don't even have to fertilize them that often. But let's talk about humidity. We already talked about it just a little bit, but just to clarify, these plants do not need a higher humidity. They just grow more quickly in a higher humidity. And because they naturally grow in a forest with a lot of moisture retentive properties, they're growing up on trees with the rain falling down. They're growing with moss and lichen and all kinds of other native plants that are epiphytic and not epiphytic. There is a lot of humidity there, and these plants grow really quickly and very well with that. But they can still grow pretty well without that. If the humidity gets too low, you'll notice that some of their foliage starts to dry off and fall off. New growth will dry up, those sorts of things. Just increase humidity a little bit. But generally, anything that's above 35–40% humidity is going to be perfectly fine for these plants. If you need them to grow quicker, give them a higher humidity. But that's true for most houseplants. Speaking of higher humidity, that's also what you're going to need if you want to propagate this plant. Propagating this plant, basically you would just take a cutting. You want to make sure it does have a node on it, and then you can go from there. You can place it in water or a prop box. Those are the two fastest ways that you're going to end up getting it to root, and then from there you can place it in your soil media of choice. When you are pruning these plants and propagating them, you are actually going to be promoting new growth on them as well. They will proceed to branch out from there. So every time you take a cutting from a plant, it'll grow one or more extra vines from it. And that's also how you can get a very full basket. You can replant those cuttings up top too. I know this question was the one that's most asked. How do you get this plant to flower? The iconic lipstick flowers, where they're bright red and beautiful. They actually look like lips from the right angle. Everybody wants to know how to get their lipstick plants to bloom. It's actually very interesting. You've got to give it less light and more cooler temperatures, especially at night. If you can give them cooler temperatures around 65 to 70 degrees. It's not that cold to us, but it does make a huge difference for the plant. And in Malaysia, that would be a little bit more chilly than average. And that's where this plant is from originally. So it takes that as a sign that it needs to produce flowers to save itself. And that's exactly what it does. And another fun fact about this plant is that the flowers will actually grow into a fruit when they're pollinated. It's absolutely fascinating. Most people only grow it for the flowers because they're so beautiful. But if you continue on that cycle, you hand pollinate it, or you have little pollinators releasing ladybugs or whatever in your home or out on your porch, then they'll actually produce fruit, which is really awesome. Overall, lipstick plants are very easy care plants, very fun to grow. They make for great hanging baskets and trailing plants. They have beautiful foliage. You can get a black pagoda lipstick plant, especially. There's quite a few varieties out there. Definitely something to explore. The black pagoda lipstick plant version actually produces yellow flowers, which is really interesting as well. It's definitely worth checking out all the different varieties and growing these very interesting, very fun, beautiful plants. Be sure to follow indoorgardening.com. We've got more information for you there. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!